Hello, I'm so happy you're here. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam and I read some books in September and I'm going to tell you about them. I did not go overboard with the number of books I read. I read like maybe a regular person amount. I don't know. What is the average number of books read by people that aren't on the internet? I ended up reading 3 books in September. I was trying really hard for 9 and we didn't reach it. Things happen and that's okay. I was having a spooky September, so I was reading just horror books, and I think that trying to read horror books for a full month was too much for me. Horror is not my favorite genre. It is something I'm trying to get a bit more into, but I wanted to give horror a bit of a chance and I am enjoying it, but I think setting the goal to read horror for an entire month was maybe a bit too long. Maybe a week next time. I am more of like a mood reader, and then I didn't want to give up my goal of reading only spooky books. So it really impacted my reading because of that. All 3 of my books were from the library. I actually had checked out even more from the library that I obviously didn't get to, but it was a very library heavy reading month for me, which is good. I love the library. It is one of my favorite spaces. The first book I read in September was Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon. So we're following 3 kids that are being raised adjacent to a medical facility for people being treated with mental illnesses in the 70s, I believe. The end of the 70s is when some of this book is set. So it's a dual timeline where we're getting some information from the 70s and then to present day with these weird things happening. These 3 children are investigating the mishappenings that are happening in the hospital. They live with their grandmother and their grandmother runs this hospital. She is very renowned for running this hospital, and we find out that there is some shady stuff happening and perhaps their grandmother is a part of it. So these kids are actually uncovering in the 70s the mysterious things that are happening within this hospital. And we're following this journey of discovery of monsters. Like, these kids are very obsessed with the idea of monsters and how sometimes people are the monsters. I really did enjoy this book. I read Jennifer McMahon last year when I read The Winter People, and I really enjoyed that one. That one gave me that creepy feeling, and I was hoping to get the same thing from this one. It didn't quite get that for me. There wasn't that element in horror that I really like, which is why I choose horror over thriller typically, because you can get in horror these more fantastical elements. I didn't really get that as much in The Children on the Hill as I did with Winter People. So I ended up giving this book a 3.5, which is the lowest rating of the 3 books. And honestly, I think it's a pretty good rating. For me, a 3 is just like book, and then anything above that means I enjoyed it more than I disliked it. If you are interested in a horror that makes your skin kind of crawl but isn't super scary, I would say that this is a good one for that. The next 2 books I read really focused more on the botanical side, which is very interesting. The first of the 2 was A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock, and it is set in Victorian England. You have a queer couple who are, just living together as bachelors. Oh, they're just friends. They live inside of a greenhouse. One is a botanist and the other is a taxidermist. And they live inside of the greenhouse because the manor that was once set on the land got burnt down. So now they make do with living their bachelor lifestyle inside of this greenhouse. And our botanist, you find out, has faced a lot of ridicule within the botany community. Is that right? The botanist community. He gets in the mail this very interesting fungus. So he works with this fungus to make a being, an entity out of human parts with flowers and different plants. So it's kind of a Frankenstein's meet Little Shop of Horrors. Now we have this being, this entity, this plant creature run by this fungus whose only drive is to survive and to spread, and what happens when you unleash this outside of the greenhouse. And I really did enjoy this. I thought that the writing was very beautiful, and it felt like I was reading a book written in that time. It's set in the late 1800s, and it feels like this book could have been written during that time, and I think that that was kind of the aim of the writing. So if you're reading more contemporary books, it might take a little while to get into the writing of A Botanical Daughter, but I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. It was such a lovely melding of those things, and the imagery of it and like the spookiness factor wasn't too scary, but it was like almost jumpy. You're anticipating what's going to happen next with this creature that they've created, this daughter of theirs, and I just had such a fantastic time with it. I gave it a solid 4 stars. I can't remember why not more than a 4. I think maybe just because it took me a while to kind of get into it, but I really did enjoy this book. Highly recommend it. And the final book I read this month was Beta Vulgaris by Margie Sarsfield, where we follow a young couple who is traveling across the country from New York to, oh my gosh, I cannot remember. This is the downside for me in my memory for not owning the physical copies and using library books, because when I'm done, I just send them back to the library and then I can't remember anything. Someone needs to start taking notes. The Midwest. So they're traveling to the Midwest to work on a beet farm. So we're following these mid-20 somethings on this journey across the country to work on this beet farm for the summer, for the end of the fall season, the harvest season for these beets, which I believe is the fall. So it's cold, it's rough, it's 12 hours, it's overnights, it's just tiresome work, but it pays really well. They've heard from friends that if you go on this excursion, you go work this program, you will get paid good money. And Elise, who is our main protagonist, is hurting for cash. Her boyfriend Tom is well off enough, but he's trying to, make it on his own without his parents' help, despite the fact that he has a trust fund. They've been together since college. They've been living together in a too expensive apartment, and Elise doesn't ask for help. They don't really share their financial situations as much. She just makes it work. So her credit cards are overdue. There's no money in her actual bank account, and she's spending this cash trying to get to this place to make more money. But then people start disappearing. They have been on this job site and people are just disappearing and no one's really saying anything about it. But Elise is getting this very weird feeling around these beats. Like, what are these beats doing? She feels like she can hear this voice in her head. Is it something to do with these beats? Are these beats the reason why people are disappearing? So we are inside of Elise's point of view, and you are just getting turmoil after bad feeling, and you watch this person throughout this book just descend into this heartbreaking, low self-confidence, self-hatred mode. I could understand if someone doesn't like the writing style of this. I think you have to be very open to very choppy writing. It's not like this eloquent, beautiful, lyrical thing like a Botanical Daughter was. This is very different. This is very hard, fast, raw, emotional, just self-hatred, beating yourself down. But the real horror in this book, in my opinion, is the inner horror of someone who beats themselves down over and over and over again. I had such a visceral reaction, like having been in not quite the headspace of Elise, but tapping into those really low moments in my own life and just being like, this is the horror. This is the awful thing. And for that, like, no book has really, for me, hit like that inner dark spot for me before. So that was the horror in it. So if you're reading it to be like, oh, I want some sentient beats story, that sounds light and fluffy, which I did going into it, it's not that. So if you can't also handle someone repeatedly repeating themselves and knocking themselves down until they are just absolutely in a pit of depression and despair and not wanting to continue on, this book is not for you. But if that is something that could feel kind of cathartic for you because you've either been there or you're trying to get out of that and just be able to place that onto a different character instead of inside of your own self, I think it's kind of cathartic and also horror, which is crazy. I did enjoy this book for sure, but it is not about an external monster. It's about our internal demons for sure, in my opinion. I gave this book a 4-star. I did find the repetitive nature of it a little bit grating, and I don't mind like a more like an in-between gray character, someone who's hard to root for. I don't mind that either, but it was just a little bit like, okay, let's get to the actual point here in our internal dialogue. Let's move the story a little bit faster. So I did give it a 4, but still really enjoyed it. But now my camera's dying, so we need to get going and pick our book of the month. The book of the month doesn't necessarily need to be the best written, the most highly rated, but just something that I really enjoyed reading for that month. And then at the end of the year, we will do bracket style, pick my book of the year. So the book of the month for September, you got a 33% chance here because they all were relatively rated the same. But I would have to say my book of the month would go to Beta Vulgaris because that book emotionally stuck with me a lot longer than the other two did. Even though Botanical Daughter was very beautifully and eloquently written and gave me like that more externally like spooky jumpy moment, Beta Vulgaris really just stuck in my brain for a lot longer after I finished reading it. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're going to read any of these books. I need a little break from horror, but if you have any horror suggestions, I will also take those. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.